Good morning, dear ladies and gentlemen. And today is a next very important topic about spirituality, occultism, and in essence self-development, self-mastery on the occult path and journey. And today's topic is simply but profoundly enough the dangers of too much darkness. I found it intuitively important to talk about this. In today's time. So I think that is a perfect correlation to my previous video, and if you didn't check that out, please check that out before you watch this, or I think you will be good regardless. But like, what are the dangers of like too much darkness within your own practice? What I have so far observed in my own practice and experiences, and thus maturation process on my path of magic and occultism, where I feel like, and I acknowledge that every individual practitioner and person has their own natural capacities, regardless of what kind of path you go down. My regards, I go down primarily the left-hand path, and I just work with more so lighter forces of energies and entities and intelligences for me to balance my dark nature out, whatever shape or form or practices it takes on for itself. But like, for me it makes sense because I embrace the occult studies of Kabbalah and, well, the more so Western tradition of Kabbalah, and so like I work for my own balance with angels, so to say. It isn't a cup of tea for everyone. It is like that. Not everybody must work with angels for balancing their own darkness out. For example, you can work also with Lucifer. He has a light aspect and a dark aspect to him. You can work with Lucifer's lighter aspect to embrace your own balance. It's as valid, if not more. But you must always listen to your own intuition and instinct when you feel, okay, it's too much. And the dangers of being too dark, or my opinion, observation, are like, you are too chaotic. You are embracing too much the dark feminine and the dark masculine. You're embracing it too much. You are basically losing grip to reality. Of course, that's the whole point of embracing the dark feminine, the dark masculine. It's the point of embracing darkness. That's the point, embracing the darker aspect of your own evolution. You want to make your inner and outer reality malleable, malleable. You want to change it. You want to open up its potentials and discover what is hidden within your own dark and unknown potential. So that makes a lot of sense when things get more chaotic, but like too chaotic, like you cannot even practice your own dark shit anymore. Like it's so much your own subconsciousness and your own emotional body, mental body, your own physical body, your nervous system is overwhelmed, and it starts to procrastinate. Like it just doesn't want to do anything anymore. It just wants to be still, be in its chaos, and dissolve and dissolve and dissolve, and it's just too much. You cannot, in a sense, you cannot bring it into balance also with your own mundane reality. Of course, as a magician, or like as a serious practitioner of different spiritual arts and magics, you want to grow spiritually, and you want to primarily focus on this. But the danger is, you are living in modern society. You are living in a structure that you must follow other obligations, having your own workplace, maybe needing to go to school, maybe keeping up your apartment, keeping up other connections, etc., etc. You have other obligations. What I recommend is, like, when you are growing spiritually, at the same time you should also focus on mastering your own, in a sense, physical aspect. You know what I mean? Your own, in a sense, physical aspect of your life. It's important that your own spiritual growth reflects also your own material growth at the same time, because if you want it or not, if you want to realize it or not, you need to have a certain sense of order, of direction, of crystallization, of direction, of your own dark energy, of your own chaos, of your own unleashed potential, so you can create for yourself the right inner and outer environment for you to ultimately grow as in my case, as a Luciferian. You want to, an occultist, you want to have the right environment, physically speaking, and the resources, physically speaking, so you can deepen and elevate your own practice, your own craft, because one thing depends upon the other. But because if you are too damn chaotic, too dark, too much in the unknown, you are going through too much transformation and dissolvement. You cannot achieve, you cannot do shit, and you, in a sense, stay behind a certain degree of your own physical or even mental and emotional development. So hence it's very important to balance these things together out, for real. The another aspect what I have also observed, embracing too much darkness, what I have also observed is, I don't know, like your own I do know, but like your own shadow, your own darker aspect of your psyche, of your soul, of your spirit. If you right now do not have the space, the actual space needed for you to appropriately integrate your own shadow, and you don't feel mature and you don't feel ready yet, and you walk with dark beings, with darker rituals, like not gonna lie, every ritual, every magic causes certain degrees of shadow work. Every certain magic you do, doesn't matter if this being, what you call upon, or this practice that you do is more lighter in nature, it still requires from you a certain degree of shadow work so that you can realize its intended potential and goal, you know. But regardless, if you are too much into your dark stuff, if you cannot give yourself grace of like having some space in between the practices, space in between your own self-development, where you can be on your own, where you can like feel things, reflect about things, and actually be with your own self, and you are like kind of walking with darker energies, and you need to, for example, work with people in your workplace or privately, etc., in a family, etc., all this connection, and your shadow flares up, and you know, what can happen is like you kind of lose your control, you kind of lose the control of your own actions, because the shadow is also a connection to the unconscious, to the subconscious. If you are working with these dark energies, you will connect to your own subconscious, your own unconscious, and you will unleash potentially some emotional baggage, some quote-unquote traumas, some things that has been buried in your shadow. And when you don't have the space, you're too much into darkness, you are too much unconscious, too much transformative, you need still to live your material life, then you can do some fucking fucked up actions. You know, you can do some actions, emotionally speaking, or to other people, and generally speaking, that you will regret. You know, you will maybe make more unhealthy and unhinged decisions and actions that you did not intend to do, consciously speaking, but because you were so much into darkness, so much, you know, digging up portions of yourself that goes beyond the limit. You know, this can and will bite you in the back of your own ass. You know, this will bite you. This will negatively affect you. You know, there is such a term, such as re-traumatization, and that's also the next thing. If you're too much into darkness, if you're too much initiating and too much going into this direction, and out of your own ego, out of your own ignorance, you feel like, yeah, I already have this and that amount of experience, I am the high magician of this and that, I am the spiritual monk of this and that. Like, no, you know, you must listen to your own feelings, your own intuition, when you feel like, okay, I'm not sure about it. You know, the moment when you question the next action, the moment when you like catch yourself, you are too much in your ego, you're too much in your shadow, you're too much in these things, and you build up, in a sense, a fake character, like you are this type of higher what have not, and you can handle this and that, you know, but like in the process of doing so, there are still some cracks in this armor. You don't feel sure, completely sure about this, and if you are started in question this next action of initiation, of walking with darkness, you should not do it. You know, maybe it would be best for you to just meditate, or go out in nature more, or, you know, focusing yourself more so to grounding yourself, and then after a while maybe embracing more so the lighter aspect of your own self and being, you know, and kind of learn to handle these things better in the future, you know. And of course, you know, if you need, because some people go that far because of their own evolutionary needs, you know. Some people are so much into darkness, so much into these extremes, so they can learn the hard way, they can have a far greater evolutionary potential realized, because they are so much going into extremes and beyond their own limitations, that the next time they are embracing their other dynamics, it's like much more greater. It's like you build kind of a foundation for yourself, for embracing the other side too. It's a paradox, I know, but like, yeah, you know, because due to your own being stuck and being, you know, in your own false self, in your extremes, what can happen is like you re-traumatize yourself, because that's the danger of going into extremes, you know. You put on your platter too much than what you can actually chew, you know. You put on too much on your back what you can actually carry. So like, if you're too much into this shit and you don't have the foundations yet and don't have the capacities yet and its actual space yet to walk through this appropriately, you know, the shadow aspects and inner and outer circumstances, they can come forward in a rather drastic way and manner, and they can potentially re-traumatize you and make this whole process of healing and shadow integration much more harder than before. You know, that's the next thing of embracing too much darkness. You can re-traumatize yourself and you actually achieve the quite opposite. Why you do want to walk with the underworld, with darkness, with the shadow, you will lose your power. And that's not the goal of this, right? So yeah, that's the next danger of embracing too much darkness. You can potentially re-traumatize you and lose even more power, whatever it may manifest for you, you know. Power can be your own wisdom, your own knowledge, your own awareness, your own emotional, mental capacities. Like these things can die off. These things can be compromised, damaged by you doing this too much, you know. Yeah, the next thing what I have observed embracing too much darkness is, besides this re-traumatization process, besides, you know, you becoming unstable and all of the good stuff, quote unquote good stuff, what can also happen is a high amount of mental and emotional instability. You know, not gonna lie, a high amount of mental and emotional instability, and potentially because that also your own bodily instability, you can become sick, physically sick. You can catch a sickness because of that, or you can become mentally ill. You know, you can become depressed. You can become even schizophrenic. You can become quote unquote crazy, you know. And if you don't have the right support system around you, if you don't have the right opportunity, the right space around you, Because I'm promising you this, at some point, if you take this darker path more seriously, you will experience some sort of mental illness and instability at some point of your own development. I do feel like it's even initiatory in nature to a certain degree. Doesn't mean, much suffering correlates to your own development and evolution. No, it doesn't. I don't think that's the point, but like, you will experience certain degrees of like mental instability, emotional instability, and sicknesses, because you transcend your own limitations by embracing much darkness. You transcend your barriers within your mind and emotional body. So like, yes, these can open up doorways and dormant blockages, emotional blockages, which can result of your programming and traumas you've gone through. And so like, this darkness walks through your system and wants to remove these blockages by you feeling and experiencing these blockages, so like you can release them and then finally embrace the higher and more developed consciousness, awareness, and version of yourself. Yeah, that's a part too. If you're embracing too much darkness, or like even darkness which you can handle, this can also happen the same way. But like, in this case, if you're doing it too much, it goes into extremes. You literally go so crazy, like you depend on drugs. You depend on drugs and other forms of negative coping mechanisms, because you are not actually aware enough and ready enough to embrace and walk through such amount of darkness. So what can happen is your own nervous system, your own spirit, your own awareness tries to find its appropriate coping strategy. It's strategies of where it can compensate by its lack of space, by its lack of readiness, awareness, maturity, and foundation for handling so much darkness. And what can happen is you can become, yes, mentally ill. You can become very deeply disillusioned with your inner and outer reality. You can dissolve yourself into chaos, and because it's so much, what tends to happen is you can fall into bad coping mechanisms and addictions, which numb your pain, which numb your state, which numb your awareness. And the problem with negative coping mechanisms, as we know it, they are not making things better. No, they make it even worse. So like, it can be like a very negative cycle to be stuck in, and it just continuously to grow in its severity, and then you're literally falling off your path. You're literally becoming a unsuccessful, a failed occultist, a failed magician, because you are too stuck up in your own ego, in your own bad coping mechanisms. And as he spoke about it, on the street was a dead fox. And fox, for me, are a symbol of the abyss, of the unconscious, of slyness, of like being very intelligent, handling with the forces of the unconscious, handling with the forces of darkness, being smart about it, crossing the abyss. We cross daily many abysses, and especially as an occultist or black magician or magician in general, we cross daily bigger and smaller abysses in some way or another, and you must be smart about it. You must be open to transform and to change and let go of old and used up methodologies, and maybe embrace new ones, healthier coping mechanisms, etc. You must be open to change. You must be open to transform yourself, and if that means you need to practice less your darker craft, then please listen to that and embrace that. There is a higher, unconscious, and yet unaware process behind it, why you need to reduce your work schedule and pace and intensity with darkness, So yeah, I think these are the most important aspects I wanted to share with you, my dear ladies and gentlemen, when it comes to the dangers of embracing too much darkness. Other than that, NAGA bless, and we surely see and hear us again.